It is still the conversation, and thank you for staying tuned. October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and so today's discussion is focused on raising awareness and support for individuals with Down syndrome and their families. And we have here in the studio Rose Modi, National President, CEO, Down Syndrome Foundation. You're welcome, ma'am. We also have here with us Solomon Omere, self-advocate, Down Syndrome Foundation. You're welcome. And Nike Dennis, National Administrator, Down Syndrome Foundation. Thank you for joining us on the conversation. Together, we'll be discussing the importance of Down syndrome awareness, the support systems that they need, and their experiences living with this condition. You're welcome once again. So let me start with you, ma'am. Let us begin from the basics. What is Down syndrome? Because a lot of people still might not be aware of what this condition is, and what are the misconceptions that people have about Down syndrome?
That's a question I've been asked over and over again. Down syndrome is a condition. A child born with Down syndrome would have an extra material in the body as against the rest of us. Let me break it down into the
layman's
commonest term. At conception, the female reproductive cell that should make up the fetus, which contains 23 chromosomes, fuses with the male chromosomal reproductive cell. And that initial cell is meant to have 46 chromosomes. Okay, and chromosomes 23. Are what the blueprint of who we are going to grow up to be. But during the pairing process, at the 21st pairing, an extra chromosome comes up. And researches are still ongoing to know where it came from, if it's from the father or from the mother. But the important thing is that the child ends up with 47 chromosomes in all the trillions of cells we have there in the body. And that is what predisposes a child to be born with the condition called Down syndrome. It's not an illness. It's not a disease. It's a condition. And it can only be managed, not cured, since it's not a disease. But a child born with that condition is predisposed also to several medical issues, like congenital heart defect, speech defect, so many different medical issues that needs to be corrected. And that is the problem that we face, that parents face. I say we face because I'm a parent. My journey started about 37 years ago. And here in our country, because there isn't much awareness created to let people know that even though they are born with the extra material in their cells, they are trainable, they are educable, and they can live life like anybody else. And that's why the foundation decides to create awareness about the condition called Down syndrome.
I want us to look at the misconceptions. Let me come to you, Nike. The misconceptions that people have had about Down syndrome.
Okay. Excuse me, thank you. So just as Mrs. Modi said, you know, usually when people don't know about it, they're scared. Particularly here in Nigeria, there's stigmatization around it. And like she just said, it's not a disease, it's a genetic condition. And so the misconception has been that perhaps it's a disease, perhaps it's something that can be cured, particularly in our cultural sector, religious sector, you know, there's a lot of challenges around that. So what we do is to create that awareness, to let people know that this is not a disease, this is not something. In fact, a lot of families tend to keep the children at home, hidden,
isolate them.
Isolated. So our resource center, you know, what we offer is support for the families. We offer resources, a holistic approach to caring for the young adults that have Down syndrome, and to really reduce some of this misconception. This is why we're here, to create that awareness. And like she said, we do it in October every year to create the awareness so that that misconception is reduced and people can begin to bring their wards and their children out for the much needed service.
I'm glad you talked about the much needed service. So I'd like you to highlight the services that, you know, is there for them to benefit.
Thank you. So a child born with Down syndrome, very early on, there's challenges, both physically and intellectual challenges. That's the why Down syndrome. That's what occurs when you have a child with Down syndrome. And so early intervention is key. When you begin to put a holistic service support in place, it may not cure, it will not cure, but it will help support that child to grow up to be a young adult that can contribute meaningful to society. What are some of these challenges we have? Physically, you know, there's some physical motor skills affected. Intellectually, cognitive, there's challenges. And so we're saying that, and of course, as Mrs. Modi mentioned, speech, ear, eyesight challenges. So when you begin to do an assessment very early on, you can identify what those needs are. You can begin to put it in place. You would see that in countries abroad, globally, we have persons with Down syndrome who are able to contribute meaningful to society. They've gone to be even in the legal sector. There was one recently who was in the House of Parliament in a country. So what are we saying is that when you put the right services in place very early on, you can begin to improve on the potential of that child to become a young adult who can be meaningful, contribute meaningfully to society.
Thank you. How are you, Solomon?
I'm fine, ma'am.
What do you like to do?
I learned about barbing.
Oh, you're barbing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you barb very well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what else?
I learned about to acting my film Godwin.
He's an actor.
He's an actor. That's great.
He was in...
Well done,
Oh, you
Solomon.
didn't see him in the Walla Donegal production called
Super Story.
Super Story, the one called, what's the name again?
Godwin.
Godwin. He was the lead actor there, acting with most of the Nollywood actors, the A-list Nollywood actors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's nice to hear
And
that.
he's also Special Olympics.
Oh, he also.
He also participated in the Special Olympics a few years back, and he won some medals.
In the US.
In the US,
You won
8 medals.
You won 8 medals in what sports? In what
Basketball.
Okay.
Basketball.
Oh,
Okay, so
congratulations.
yeah. So let me ask, how do you stay motivated, Solomon?
I want to all my friends in the Down syndrome, like Bito Divine, who support Down syndrome. Then one extra chromosome in life for singing, praise and worship. I sing.
You sing too.
I sing, I dance,
Oh, he's a good dancer.
I am fighting, boxing.
Boxing,
Yes,
yeah.
and swimming.
And swimming too.
Yes, ma'am.
You're multi-talented.
And that day, I now went to, me and mommy are traveling last week. Come to see my mom.
To see your mom.
Last week, my daddy's burial has gone.
Okay. So I think what you can deduct from that is he mentioned earlier his friends.
Yes.
What we do at Down Syndrome Foundation, the Resource Center, It's a residential facility, and I'm sure you'll probably ask me about that later. It's a residential facility that also provides holistic support services. And so these students, our students tend to miss each other when they go home. You know, the families are involved. Yes, it's a community. So when they go home on holidays, you know, like it's structured like the regular schools in Lagos State. So when they go home, they can't wait to come back because they see their friends. There's a social integration that we encourage, you know, which they probably don't necessarily get when they get home. Some, when they get home, are just isolated, locked up, and so on. So the cue from that is that he enjoys being around his friends.
I like sports very much.
He likes sports.
Yes.
I think we talked about sports a few days ago.
I'm glad to hear. You know, I used to think that, you know, people with this condition don't even talk at all.
They do.
I'm glad Solomon can
No, you do
express
have some
himself.
who have
Yes.
maybe dual diagnosis. There are quite a number of children born with Down syndrome also have autistic tendencies, and most of them could be non-verbal. But if it is just straightforward Down syndrome, they have speech, they can talk, they can communicate, provided, as Mrs. Dennis says, you start early intervention in time, because they have speech defect. I didn't mention about some of the physical stigmata that you could use to identify a child with Down syndrome. Part of it is that they are born with a smaller mouth cavity that tends to make their tongue to look large, and because of that it affects their speech. So speech therapy needs to be carried out in time, early enough for them to be able to communicate properly, for you to understand what they are saying. But 90% of them can communicate quite well.
So I'm still talking about awareness now. The society, of course, will always, you know, stigmatize them. So how do you prepare, you know, them, those living with this condition, in order not to feel, you know, bad?
Okay. You know, we mentioned intellectual disability.
Okay.
And I believe that oftentimes most of them are not even aware of the stigma. They are lovable people. They, you know, they just, they love unconditionally. They would come in and interact with you normally. It is us who think we are normal. You know, I say, who is normal anyway? We all have one issue or another. So for the most part, because of that, the major part of Down syndrome is the intellectual disability. And so oftentimes they are childlike, they have childlike minds. And you know, with children, they don't really care what's going on in their surroundings. So that's really what happens often. But again, we try to have them in a setting where they're comfortable, and we begin to, you know, just talk about different things and let them be aware through this advocacy that we do, and through the walks and everything that we do. Let them be aware what the issue is. And for somebody like Solomon and others who are young adults, they are self-advocates. They understand, and they go out there to represent themselves and other young adults. So they are aware of what it is, and in their own way, they are able to adapt and let people know about Down syndrome.
Okay. Everyone claims to be part of building an inclusive society, but do we really have an inclusive society? What is it like for people living with this condition in terms of educational support and even employment opportunities? Who wants to go for that?
In our society, I think that is not in existence. The society is not inclusive, particularly for people who are born with intellectual disability, which Down syndrome happens to come under. In the more organized societies, when a child is born and a particular disability is identified as what that child is born with, the right structure is put on ground from birth throughout life. But here, there's no such thing in our society. And because of that, you cannot say that it's an inclusive society, both medically, which is the most important, because if they are not well or they are not alive, you can't do any other thing for them. Socially, educationally, and even in terms of employment. The question I always ask people is, can somebody show me one person with Down syndrome or intellectual disability who has been given employment or who have been given scholarship to go to school? Because these children are born, they are no respect of their class or status in life. They can be born into any family. But it's those families that are indigent that even suffer more. For those who are capable of taking care of their children, either they would whisk the child out of the country, drop somewhere in the more organized societies and come back, and the child is being taken care of. But what about the indigents who cannot take care of them? Because taking care of them actually requires a multidisciplinary team. And this team has to be in place to make sure that that particular inclusion is properly effected. But we don't have it in our society.
So this brings me to the question now that how can Nigerians, now support, people living with Down syndrome and help them to thrive in the society?
They could begin by not being patronizing, by treating them as every other individual is being treated, giving them the opportunity that others take for granted, and then supporting organizations like us that are trying to put the right structure on ground to help the families that have these children. And we need to start first with, I would say the government needs to be the first to start and set an example for others to follow. And there should be a legislation in place to make sure that these people are well taken care of. That's where we should start from.
Okay, for parents who have children living with this condition, what word of advice do you have for them?
For those who are still hiding them.
They're still hiding them, keeping them in isolation, and those who are not financially buoyant to take care of them.
Okay, thank you. I think having a platform like this, having media platforms support us in getting the word out there and creating that awareness is very essential. Because like we said earlier, not a lot of people know that even this condition exists or what to do if they have a child with this condition. And I think that also, just to add to what Mrs. Modi said, the health sector is also a big part of this. The health sector, for the most part in Nigeria, some of them are not even familiar with the condition, let alone know what services they can put in place to support families who have children or young adults with this condition. Oftentimes, the child is kept at home, and then when it's too late and the child has become a young adult, they find out about us and bring the child or the young adult to us. We have young adults up to about, the oldest in our resource center is about 44 years old, But if you see him or her, they don't look 44. Like I said, they look very childlike, yes. So we really need platforms and mediums to help us spread the word. October every year, we do the awareness program. And I always like to talk about this because this is an opportunity for us. In fact, twice a year, we have awareness programs. March is dedicated World Down Syndrome Day. And in 2011, when this day was inaugurated, our president, Mrs. Modi, was invited, the only African to speak at the United Nations in New York, because they saw the work she was doing. And so we're saying that we need to promote, create the awareness and just go out there and spread the word. So in March we do the awareness, and in October is our awareness month, where we go out and do all kinds of activities to let people know. We started on Saturday with the awareness walk. We do it every year. We invite friends, partners, the media. We invite everybody out to walk with us, and of course all our students and partners and other schools that are other disability schools. So that's the only way we can do it. Create the awareness, begin the health sector to begin to realize that they need to train their professionals so that they can identify this from the onset and put the right services in place and have resources, link us to these people so that we can now begin to support them and provide the much needed services for them.
I know, I'm aware that, children with other conditions such as autism and others, do go to regular schools so that they can, be carried along and feel as as normal as children in normal schools. Do you do that for your students?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
In Nigeria, yes, we promote inclusivity, but we're still not there yet. Unfortunately, when you try to do that, some schools, parents will withdraw their children. Yes. Or tell the school not to allow that child to be a part of. Yes, it happens. So what do? We at the center, we are able to, like I said, if there's the right services in place, early intervention, it's easier to begin to integrate that child into regular schools. I know that Lagos State has some schools where they do integration and some students can go there. But it's not enough. We need more schools doing that. And like I said, it's a partnership thing. The health sector, the educational sector, the government, and the non-profit organizations need to partner together to find the best solution for our children who one way or another have these disabilities.
I must commend what you're doing, Rose and Nike. It's quite laudable, and but beyond the TV, radio organizations and walks that you have been doing, this awareness, have you taken it to the communities, where you get to speak with community leaders, and what has been your response from this?
Mrs. Modi?
Ms. Modi?
You're asking me? Yes, we have done that. Over the years. Incidentally, Down Syndrome Foundation is 23 years here in Nigeria. And over the years, we have reached out to the grassroots, the community. Incidentally, last year when we did, during Awareness Month, it was the Ifako
Ijayi
local government that partnered with us. And it was actually a huge success, because without them collaborating with us, it would be difficult for us to reach out there. Because number one, it takes quite a lot logistically to put some of the programs in place by ourselves. Being non-governmental, we do not have any support from the government apart from the individuals and corporate organizations who partner once in a while. But for that to be effective, for it to really work, the government needs to partner with us so that we could reach effectively to the grassroots. But I'm very grateful that Ifako Ijayi local government, I think, partnered with us last year, and they were able to reach down to the grassroots and get some of the people to be part of what we were doing. And in fact, it was even held in the Ifako local government office, secretariat, and so on. We carried out so many activities there. And that's the only way we can go. We can't do it alone. The task is daunting. unless we have partnership or collaboration, it would be difficult for us to reach them. And of course, you know the number of local governments we have in the country, even in Lagos State. And for us to do it effectively, we have to partner with the government.
Someone,
Ma?
what message do you have for people with Down syndrome?
I want to use support in Down syndrome. Like all my friends in school, they are doing something for dancing performance when they on the 19th, they are doing for the dinner night. Dinner night to come in to have fun for them.
Oh, yeah, now inviting have fun. Okay.
So just to, if I can just, well done, Solomon. He actually. So part of the awareness, like we said, you know, last few days ago, we did a 2-day medical outreach program, which the Ministry of Health also supported us with. And of course, Ifako Ijayi came with some support as well. And then following that, we're having a webinar. A webinar where we invite experts, panelists to just talk about how we can begin to move forward and create that awareness and make sure the right services are in place. So one of the things, and then following that, what he's saying is the dinner. We're doing a fundraising. And the fundraising is really, we want to build a multi-purpose facility. It has gotten to a point where, you know, every time we do the awareness, people know, people hear, and they come in to us to do the assessment and try and get the right services. But the current building where we're at is busting at the seams. We need to expand. And so what Solomon is saying is dinner on the 19th, fundraising. He wants to let us know that we are doing a fundraising to expand and build this multi-purpose center, facility, which would house therapeutic, educational, and so many other different things that is needed to put interventions and services in place for persons with intellectual disability. So that's what he's saying.
All right. We need to go.
We need to go. Okay. Quite an interesting conversation we've had with Rose Modi, National President, CEO, Down Syndrome Foundation, Solomon Omere, Self-Advocate Down Syndrome Foundation, and Nike Dennis, National Administrator, Down Syndrome Foundation. We've been talking about Down Syndrome Month, which is October. And, you know, Rose said something very, very important. Down syndrome is not an illness,
it's not
and it is not a disease.
Condition.
It is a condition.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. We'll go on another short break. When we come back, the conversation will continue.
Let the conversation continue.